I'm Dr. Patricia Kuhl. I'm co-director of the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences at the University of Washington in Seattle. I am one of 12 counselors, sort of a board of directors for the National Academy of Sciences. The National Academy of Sciences was established based on the need for science. So in 1863, Abraham Lincoln decided that we need a group of scientists to tell the country in an objective and trustworthy way what are the answers to questions that society is asking. And recently, our strategic plan was reformulated to remind us all that there are so many issues now that the public needs to rely on science to be able to answer and address.
What report is the National Academy of Sciences releasing on September 15th?
The National Academy is announcing a brief that answers the question, does quality early education lead to more successful lives as adults? So that's a question that's been posed many times by the public. Does it really matter? And the answer is yes. Across all studies, there is strong evidence that it not only benefits children in the short term, but if you follow them way out into their lives, beyond high school, to their lives as early adults, you see the benefits of early education. And that is a phenomenal response to come from the agency that answers questions about space and about COVID and about cyber attacks and all of the issues that matter to our safety and our success as a nation.
What are the key findings that underlie this report?
I think the key findings are 20 years of behavioral research, looking at interventions that involve early education and then following children over the years. And then in the last decade, I think that the clincher has been brain studies such as the kind that I do, but certainly not only my own, that show that when children are bathed in early stimulation of the ordinary kind, meaning talking to children, playing with children, having them interact socially so they develop excellent social emotional skills. When that happens in the normal course of everyday lives of children, their brains show a difference. You can see it structurally. You can see the pathways in the brain getting stronger because we can actually measure that now. And you can see the functional activation in the brain when the child hears a word, sees a face, recalls something that they heard. You can see the activation patterns operating more swiftly and more efficiently in the brain. So we now have hardcore brain evidence of the short-term success, and then that evidence accrues over time to see the long-term success. So that's the bottom line of the Academy report, but there are three other messages that are really, really important. One has to do with equity. As the Academy recognizes the importance of early education, they're also recognizing that the parents whose children need it the most disadvantaged families, are in fact in the United States the least likely to have the opportunity for early education. And so the Academy is reminding citizens of the country that equity matters and that any solutions have to take into account all of our children, not just the upper middle class and people who can afford to give their children lots of interesting experiences, but a public, a sort of program, a leadership program that establishes for all children the right to early education. So that's a very important second point. The third point is the need for teacher education. What the report says is not just anyone is an adequate teacher of our young children, that it takes a professional approach. It takes an education in early learning, in the brain, in early childhood development. And so it underscores the need to professionalize early childhood development education. The brain science underscores how much learning socially matters, learning together. And so it takes the approach that while it's called early education, some people think of it as early play and exploration of the natural world with one another.
Know how to do that, though, takes real training, real education, real understanding of child development,
yes,
real knowledge of how to intervene in a way that keeps the learning joyful and alive and meaningful for children.
Yes, yes, exactly that, exactly that. The old method of education, in which all the chairs are facing forward and no one talks except the teacher, that's gone. The new social classroom is, of course, very exploratory, very almost circular, where children are always collaborating and always working in groups and with one another, because that shares what's in individual minds. And this business of equity, if our classrooms are classrooms of color, representing many different bases of their development and their cultural practices and their cultural values. What children not only learn is, what does the world look like through my eyes, but what does it look like through her eyes and his eyes? And that joint, kind of resolution about what things are about to different people underscores a very important point in early development, that minds differ and that differences can be instructive about how we jointly solve problems.
And the fourth point is?
The fourth point is that it's going to take resources. It's going to take a public-private partnership. It's going to take government leadership and the decision on our parts that if we invest in children, which is what we should do, we're not only helping them, those children and their families, but our country and our future. The jobs of the future require creative, innovative children who are willing to entertain different ideas and work to a joint solution and work internationally. Across the world, many countries are making these investments in early childhood education. And so if the United States doesn't do it, we will fall behind. And so the point underscored, the fourth point underscored, is the need for government and leadership, but also philanthropy, because philanthropy often pops in to show the evidence earlier than government programs will fund it for all. So what's interesting about some of the data being covered to write this report is that it's often stimulated by philanthropic support that led the way for adventurous studies about interventions. What would happen to children if we took the poorest children and bathed them in this information and let them interact? How do they come out? And the answer is, it makes a huge difference, a huge difference.
There's been a historical split between the notion of early childhood as care for children while their parents are employed and early education. It seems to me that this report brings together those two strands and says we can't focus on one to the exclusion of others. We need care and education.
That's exactly right. I mean, isn't it underscored right now during COVID-19, where the lack of any childcare has caused the nation to come to a strict halt. Now is the time to make that change, because we've never underscored the importance of early care for our children more than at the present moment.
Maybe COVID will actually erase those words of care versus education, and we'll either call it early education or we'll think of a new word to bring us together. What are your final words to the people who might be listening to you today?
Well, I just hope that the public realizes that we exist for them. The National Academy of Sciences exists to answer people's questions. Please get on the website, the science behind it, and ask your question, and I hope that it can be answered.
Thank you so much for doing this today.
And thank you for inviting me.
To celebrate. It's truly a day to celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you so much.